when we talked about families, it's not just about marriage and family, a human issue. It's about theology. As the Bible is a migration literature, we can see the migration experience and how it shapes Jacob's experience. Can you sense Jacob's fear? Jacob fears for his life and his standing among the dominant culture, which as Asian Americans, we can find resonance as minority living in the dominant culture.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our next plenary speaker, Chloe Sun. Chloe Sun is Professor of Old Testament and the Program Director of the Chinese Studies Center at Fuller Seminary. She previously taught at Logos Evangelical Seminary in Los Angeles. She publishes in both Chinese and English and conducts Bible seminars locally and internationally in Hong Kong, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and Europe. Her recent English publications include Attempt Great Things for God, Theological Education in Diaspora, Conspicuous in His Absence, Studies in the Song of Songs, and Esther, and then finally, Exodus, a pastoral and contextual commentary. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chloe Sun.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here among our colleagues. I'm honored to be presenting this topic on Jacob, and thanks to Dr. David Chow's invitation. So for this conference, I chose Jacob's family because his family is the messiest in the book of Genesis, as we will see. Dr. Nam already laid a solid foundation for today's conference, so I'm going to skip the big pictures. When we talk about families, I think about the book of Genesis. And Genesis 1 to 11 mentioned the first family, Adam and Eve, and their two children, Cain and Abel. And that family is dysfunctional because a murder happened. And then chapters 12 to 50 is about 3 generations, started with Abraham's family. So I will frame Jacob's family as the continuation of Abraham's family. In Genesis 2, as we all know, it involves marriage and family, although marriage and family, those two words are not there in chapter 2, but they are implied. Things change in chapter 3, and I want to highlight Adam's problem, which is passivity. So when Eve gave the fruit to Adam, Adam didn't say a word, even though he was the first person who received a direct command from God. And Adam's passivity passes down to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, as we will see. And also tension happens because of their marriage. And also want to highlight chapter 4. This is the first case of sibling rivalry. In this story, we see the place of divine favoritism and how it plays out in this story. And it sets a pattern for the rest of the sibling rivalry stories in the book of Genesis. For example, God's favoritism over the younger sibling also appears in the story of Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, Joseph over his brothers. And when Cain brought the offering to the Lord, in that context, this is the context of worship. So we can think about our church context where brothers and sisters experience sibling rivalry as well. So this story sets the pattern for a lot of other patterns in the book of Genesis. And one way we can center the book of Genesis is the word blessing. So when God calls Abraham, the word bless appears 5 times. And this 5-fold blessing corresponds to the 5-fold blessing in Genesis 1 to 11. So by choosing Abram becomes the means to bring God's blessing to all the families of the earth. And the word families appeared in chapter 12, verse 3. So when we talked about families, it's not just about marriage and family, a human issue. It's about theology. That's why we're here today. I'm going to focus on Jacob's family. So from Abraham, Isaac to Jacob, different patterns emerge. And when we talked about Jacob, first I'll talk about his migration experience, and then I'll be focusing on Jacob as the brother and Jacob as the father, and in the end, I'll bring in the blessing narrative. So if Jacob introduced himself, this is how I would imagine him. This is how he may introduce himself. I am a perpetual wrestler. I wrestle with my brother, my dad, my uncle, myself, and God. Here is another narrative that I imagine Jacob would introduce his grandfather. And if you prefer, you may close your eyes and just imagine me as Jacob. So I'm going to do this in first person. Hi, my name is Jacob. My grandfather Abraham was born and raised in Ur and then migrated to Canaan. I was born in Canaan. My grandfather had 2 wives, Sarah and Hagar. Things were complicated between them. In the end, my father Isaac was born, and the other wife Hagar and her son Ishmael, my half-uncle, were sent away. I always wonder how my father felt about their leaving and the loss of the half-brother Ishmael. I am a 3rd-generation migrant. Like my grandfather, I also migrated from Canaan to Haram, Padan Aram area, and then back to Canaan, and later to Egypt. So I understand what it means to leave home, to be a reverse migrant, and to live as a displaced person. As the Bible is a migration literature, we can see the migration experience and how it shapes Jacob's experience. Now, this is another imaginary narrative that I imagine how Jacob would introduce his family of origin. I love my mom, Rebecca, more than my dad, Isaac, because I always feel that he loves my brother Esau more than me. Esau likes to hunt, and my dad loves to eat meat. The father always likes the son who's more like him. I spend more time with my mom while trying to earn my dad's approval, but to no avail. My dad went through a lot. At one point, my grandfather tried to kill him with a knife for religious reasons. Imagine what kind of trauma that would leave my dad with. Perhaps that explains why my dad has been so passive sometimes, as if he cannot control his own fate. However, I have the most problems with my brother Esau. We are twins. It's not fair that he gets to be the firstborn and receive double portions of my dad's inheritance. So I wrestled with him since we were in our mother's womb. I tried to find ways to get what's mine. I'd made him sell his firstborn right to me, and I also stole my father's blessing that were meant for him as well. Well, with my mom's help, and that blessing should have been mine anyway. He didn't care about the blessings. I've been cheated by my uncle multiple times. He tricked me into marrying my first wife and had to work for 7 more years to marry the love of my life. Does this sound messy to you? Yeah? Now, why would Jacob want to steal his father's blessing and his brother's firstborn status? Could it be because of his birth order as a younger twin brother? You know, he's so close to be the firstborn, maybe seconds away or minutes away, but he gets to be the second son. Could it be because Jacob was dissatisfied with being the younger sibling and being resentful of it? Could it be because he wanted his father's approval but never got it because Isaac favored Esau? Jacob's stealing or seizing could be a way to compensate for the feeling of injustice in his birth order and his father's favoritism. I know there are many PhDs among us, among the audience, and I understand the label model minority is a myth. But could it be because this achiever among us is a way to compensate for some kind of lack? It could be a lack of parental attention or the lack of acceptance in the dominant culture. Perhaps we can think why there are so many overachievers in the Asian American culture and community. The next map is not a Google map, but I just want to show Jacob's migration is from south to the north, and after 20 years, returning to the south, and then later to further south to Egypt. Now let's go to Jacob's migration experience. So his first migration experience is from Canaan to Padam Aram to escape his brother's fury. And now flashback to chapter 25. So in Rebekah's womb, Jacob and Esau were already struggling. And Rebekah knew God's prophecy firsthand. So the prophecy is that the older shall serve the younger. And the reality after the birth of the sons is that Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his gain, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So Rebekah knew this birth order and this prophecy firsthand. Could her way of helping Jacob reflect her understanding of God's choice for Jacob? It's her way of helping God. So by helping Jacob, Rebekah could be helping God. And did Jacob know about this prophecy? And what do you think? If Jacob knew that the older shall serve the younger, he used his way to get what should have been his. Is it possible? So between wrestling and divine blessing, there is ambiguity between divine agency and human initiative. Next slide. When Jacob lived in Padam Aram with his uncle cheated him. Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel, but on the wedding night, look, it's Leah. So the word look expresses shocking and surprise. It's not a pleasant surprise, it's a shocking surprise. And the word in Hebrew is hine. Hine can also be translated as an exclamation, like, ah, like a screaming, ah, it's Leah. It's not funny for Jacob. Okay, it's not funny. It's funny for us. When leaving Laban, his uncle, after 20 years, Jacob's words to Laban can be summarized in chapter 31, verse 41. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. 10 times can mean multiple times. So this is a form of poetic justice. Jacob, the trickster, met his counterpart, his uncle Laban, who tricked Jacob in both his marriage and work. So migration also involves suffering. Now the next slide. So on the way returning to Canaan, something happened, and this is a tragedy about the daughter of Jacob, Dinah. She was raped by Shechem. In this whole story, Jacob the father didn't do anything. He was being passive. In contrast, his 2 sons, Simeon and Levi, they used deception and violence to avenge their sister. But what Jacob said is revealing. I highlighted in green. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me and making me odious among the inhabitants of the land. Among the Canaanites and the Perizzites and my men being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I will be destroyed, I and my household." Can you sense Jacob's fear? Jacob fears for his life and his standing among the dominant culture, which, as Asian Americans, we can find parallel or resonance as minority living in the dominant culture. Do we care how the dominant culture perceives us? This particular experience reflects the discord or the tension between the dominant culture and one's minority status. So migration has an impact on Jacob's identity. Next slide. From Canaan to Egypt, this is Jacob's third migration experience. This is a passage where Joseph instructed his brothers what to say to Pharaoh. We can look at the second paragraph. So this is what Joseph said. When Pharaoh calls you and says, "What is your occupation?" you shall say, "Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, that you may live in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is loathsome to the Egyptians." Goshen is a good land. It's a fertile land. It's good to raise cattle. But Goshen is also a land of segregation. Chinatown used to be a land of segregation. It used to be a region for Chinese migrants. It used to be an ethnic enclave. It used to confine the Chinese to that region only. Every Hebrew shepherd is loathsome to the Egyptians. Try to think about that phrase. Egyptians has this cultural superiority over other nations around him. So this may resonate with the early Asian American history. Have you heard about the yellow peril? It was a term used to describe the fear of the dominant culture over the Asian culture and communities. So we can also think about the anti-Asian hate in recent Asian American history here in the US. It is comparable to how the Egyptians perceived the Hebrew shepherds. On the surface, letting Jacob's family live in the land of Goshen seems like a benevolent choice from Pharaoh. On the other hand, it may not be so. Now we shift the focus from migration to Jacob as the brother. The two brothers, Esau and Jacob, compete for their father's blessing. And the two sisters, Leah and Rachel, compete to give birth to sons. So the rivalry between the two sisters mirrors the rivalry between the two brothers, though the goals of their competition differ. There's something about being twins. I've known a few pair of twins. They don't want to be in the same college. They want to be different. They want to have their own distinct identity. They don't want to be identified as the other twin. Something about twins. Now, next slide. There is generational pattern that runs from Abraham's family to Jacob's family, which is a father and two wives. One is a favored wife. And there's tension between the two wives. Next slide. Okay, I'd like to spend more time on Jacob as the father. So Reuben is his firstborn son, and the secondborn son is Simeon, the third one is Levi, and he has a daughter, Dinah, and the fourth one son is Judah, and Jacob's favorite son is Joseph. So here is a table of these 12 sons and their mothers. The first four sons were born by Leah, and then number 5 and number 6. I don't know, in Chinese culture, if we have like more than 2 children, sometimes we say number 1, number 2, number 3. I'm not sure if you do that. 老大, 老二, 老三, you know. So the birth order affects their relationship with Jacob. And I highlighted Joseph and Benjamin because these 2 sons were born by Rachel, Jacob's favorite wife. Now let's look at Reuben. Something happened after the death of Rachel. I highlighted in green. Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. And Israel is another name for Jacob. So in that culture, to sleep with one's father's wife, a woman, is a way to show that I want to take your place. It's like a usurpation. It's an attempt to be the head of the household. Now we have to ask, what makes Reuben want to do that? He's the firstborn son. Why is he in such a hurry to claim his father's place? Could it be because Jacob favored Rachel and her sons? And now that Rachel is dead, Reuben feared that Jacob would name Joseph the firstborn. That's why he's doing what he's doing, to claim his rightful place. Ironically, in 1 Chronicles 5:2, Jacob named Joseph as his firstborn son because Reuben defiled his father's bed. So, how much is this God's doing? How much is this Reuben's doing? We can fill in the gaps. And in this whole story, the scripture says Israel heard of it, but did he do anything about it? There is no disciplinary action on Jacob's part. But in Genesis 49, when Jacob blessed, quote unquote, blessed Reuben, it sounds like a curse. The second and the third son, Simeon and Levi. And the story is about the rape of Dinah. So notice the silence of Jacob. Jacob kept silent until they came in. And then the Bible described the emotion of the two sons. They were grieved, they were angry, because he, the rapist, had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Now I wonder, why did the two sons act so violently? Could it be because of Jacob's passivity? Jacob is the head of the household. He should have done something about the rape of his daughter, but he didn't do anything. And this description, grieved and angry, well, because of the rape, or what the rapist did. But could it also be because of the lack of action on Jacob's part? And so the two sons took matters into their own hand. So we saw earlier what Jacob said. You have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land. Notice the word me, and I and my. So it seems Jacob cares more about his face, 面子, than his daughter's justice. And in Jacob's blessing to Simeon and Levi, it also sounds like a curse. And we see the tension between the father-son relationship. The same story about the rape of Dinah. It is strange. There is no explanation of the meaning of Dinah. But every son has a name, and the Bible gives the explanation of the meaning of their names, but not Dinah. The word Dinah comes from the word din, like judge or justice or judgment, but there's no explanation why. And in chapter 30, verse 21, the word afterwards seems like a afterthought. It seems like this daughter is shameful to the family, and the narrator doesn't want to talk more about her. The next slide. And so in this whole story, Jacob was silent. He didn't do anything to defend his daughter. But then at the same time, Dinah is being silenced by the narrator. Why didn't the narrator give some space for her to say something? Why wasn't she given a voice? Could her narrative silence point to something else? That Jacob favored sons more than daughters. Would Jacob act differently if Dinah were a boy? Now we turn to Joseph. We know that Joseph has a colorful coat. But why would Jacob show his favoritism to Joseph so publicly, having experienced parental favoritism in his own family of origin? Is there a psychological explanation? Jacob should have known what this colorful coat means for the rest of the brothers. They all want to have this colorful coat as well. They all want their father's love. But Jacob favored Joseph. So parental favoritism is a generational pattern. And then that causes jealousy, competition, sibling rivalry, fratricide. But in the end, Joseph said, it's God who sent me. So God is involved in all these stories. Now let's go to Judah. Judah is the fourth in line. He's the next in line. But he's being overlooked because of Jacob's favoritism over Joseph. So in Genesis 37, it's about the story of Joseph being sold by his brothers. And then the next chapter, chapter 38, is about the story of Judah and Tamar. So, and it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in to her. A Canaanite woman, and later on in the story, this Canaanite woman could be a cult prostitute. So by going into this woman, it could be an act of worship, a Canaanite god or goddess. What's going on here? What is Judah doing? Could it be because Judah resent his father's favoritism over Joseph and he rebelled against it? I'm out of here. I'm out of this family. I'm going to be on my own, doing something else. We don't know. A little recap of Jacob the father. Next slide. In this relationship with his sons and daughter, we see Jacob's silence, passivity, indecisiveness, actionlessness. Jacob's favoritism over Rachel and Joseph causes jealousy and division among wives and sons. And we have to ask these questions. Why would Reuben want to sleep with Jacob's concubine? And why would Jacob not discipline Reuben, Simeon, and Levi? Why would Jacob not take any action about Dinah's rape? Is she a daddy's girl? Did Jacob love his sons more than his daughter? And what about Judah's behavior? Next slide. In this book, Encounters in the Dark by Noelle Burt, she notices 5 episodes in mother's womb, father's blindness, Bethel's evening, marriage bed, and Jabbok crossing. They all happened in the dark. At the same time, God is both revealed and concealed. So I now will transition to divine blessing. It is strange that Joseph seems to be active in defending his firstborn status and his father's blessing, but he is a passive father. Do you see the discrepancy? I wonder why. I wonder if there is an explanation between Jacob's active pursuing or changing his own fate and his role as a father. There is also another paradox between divine presence and Jacob's always taking things into his own hand. God already prophesied the older will serve the younger, but it seems like Jacob is trying to use his own ways to achieve that. Now, the blessing theme runs in the Jacob story. I just want to highlight Genesis chapter 33. On the way returning from Padam Aram to Canaan, Jacob met Esau, and he said, "Take my present from my hand." And the first appearance of the word present can also be translated as tribute. So for Jacob, he sees Esau as someone who's in authority, and he's paying a tribute to Esau. But then the second word, verse 11, "Please take my gift, which has been brought to you." This word gift, baraha, means blessing. Jacob used to be the one who stole blessing from Esau. Now, by returning the gifts to Esau, using the word blessing, it symbolically shows that Jacob is returning the blessing back to Esau. So reconciliation is framed by returning the stolen blessing. Next slide. When Jacob is in Egypt, this is his third migration experience. Joseph presented Jacob to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. He described his days as few and unpleasant, ra'im, evil, plural. It can be translated as disastrous. So my days are few and disastrous. This is how Jacob described his life. Imagine the aging Jacob blessed Pharaoh, showing his transforming character from someone who stole blessing to someone who blessed others. Jacob has come a long way. There is a book entitled The Limping Jacob. This limping Jacob stuck in my mind. In chapter 32, Jacob wrestled with a mysterious man. It could be an angel of God. And through this experience, a part of his thigh was wounded. And so Jacob becomes a limping Jacob. So when Esau saw Jacob after 20 years, what he saw was a limping Jacob. And when we think about this wound on Jacob's thigh, it is hidden, invisible. But at the same time, the limping Jacob also makes it visible. In this book, The Wounded Storyteller, on page 2, it says, the body sets in motion the need for new stories when its disease disrupts the old stories. So what it means is that when we have a serious illness or deformity in our bodies, it makes us tell new stories because we become a different person. And so for Jacob, the wound must have changed him somehow. Did he change? Yes and no. He has a new name. But this happens in chapter 32, and the story of Dinah happens in chapter 34. And in that story, Jacob didn't do anything. And so there's something to think about. Jacob was physically touched by God, but he remains who he is. Next slide. In Genesis 42, the whole chapter is about Jacob's blessing to his 12 sons. So this blessing theme runs through the whole book of Genesis, and it forms a literary arc from Genesis 49 to Deuteronomy 33, and then comes back to Genesis 1. This book, From Fratricide to Forgiveness, Matthew Schlimm's argument is that the end of Genesis is about Joseph and his forgiveness, and how Joseph's forgiveness and reconciliation with his brothers answers the episode that happened in the story of Cain and Abel. In the end, Joseph said to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." There are evil, the presence of evil in Jacob's family, from Jacob's own life to Joseph's life and among his brothers. But in the end, God meant it for good. And this echoes the creation goodness. So the restoration of creation goodness, when God created every day, God saw that it was good. And at the end of Genesis, this creational goodness was being restored through Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers and providing for them. So this story forms a contrast to Cain and Abel's story, where Cain said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" So in the story of Joseph, he would say, "Yes, I am my brother's keeper." Next slide. In Jacob's journey of migration, home, leaving home, coming home. This pattern parallels Israel's identity formation: home, exile, return. And what about the Asian American families? Our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation. And how does migration shape our identity, our family dynamics, our parents' and grandparents' generations? Could Jacob's imperfect fatherhood shape by his migration experience? Because migration can be a form of trauma depending on our particular experience. Did his behavior of achieving, seizing, taking reflect his internal struggle between divine blessing and his father's favoritism? To conclude, Jacob's family has this pattern of favoritism, sibling rivalry, jealousy, passivity, betrayal, deception, and fratricide. The role of the father shapes the family dynamics. Patterns passed down from one generation to another, but God's redemptive goodness still works through imperfect people and families. Jacob becomes Israel, whose 12 sons form a nation that intends to bless all the families of the earth. So despite family chaos, reconciliation, grace, and purpose can be found. The persistence of messiness in Jacob's family parallels the persistence of divine presence. Thank you.